Hello, and welcome to BIA's Leading Local Insights podcast, your go-to spot for staying ahead in the dynamic local advertising marketplace. You'll hear BIA's top experts and their distinguished guests break down the trends, technologies, and innovations reshaping local media. Plus, you'll frequently get highlights from BIA's U.S. local advertising forecast. Thanks for tuning in. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to BIA's Leading Local Insights podcast. I'm your guest host, Mike Boland, and our guests today are BIA's Mark Dugan and Executive Chairman of Cox Media Group, Steve Pruett. So, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Mike.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys here. It's an honor. I think we're going to have fun with this. There's a lot of great stuff we have to get into. We're here today to basically talk about the automotive vertical, especially as it relates to local markets and some recent BIA data on that topic. But first, for context, let's find a bit more about you guys for those unfamiliar. So, Mark, why don't you start just a bit about yourself and your role at BIA?
Sure. I'm a Senior Director at BIA of Forecast Operations and Client Relations. I've been in the media industry for about 20 years, including the past 4 with BIA. In my current role, I help to oversee our forecasting process, analyzing data, and writing reports to support our clients. We develop local market forecasts for every television and radio market in the U.S., covering 96 business verticals across 16 different media channels.
Yeah, that's all valuable stuff as we're going to get into. And Steve?
I am, as you said, Executive Chairman of Cox Media Group. We own radio stations and TV stations in major markets across the country, total of about 20 markets when you add TV and radio together. I have a long history in local broadcast, starting in radio on air, then in sales, TV sales. Then I built television stations in the 80s, built a number of other kinds of media companies in the 80s, then became an investment banker. Then in around the 2000s, went into being a corporate executive. I was at Sinclair as EVP of television and COO there for 6 or 7 years. And then I've spent the last 7 years here at CMG.
Nice. A lot of great historical perspective there, too, that I think we'll get into.
A lot of markets, a lot of people.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. So as I said, our sort of word of the day is autos and all the drivers and dynamics, excuse the pun, drivers of these local markets. So why don't we start by sort of framing the discussion around the study that I alluded to earlier that was just released by BIA. So Mark, let's start with you. You played a big role, obviously, in that report. So tell us sort of the top findings or your biggest takeaways at a high level before we go deeper.
Sure. Autos are still one of the really anchor categories in local advertising. We're projecting about $10.7 billion in local ad spend across tiers 1 through 3 in 2026, which is actually up a couple of points year over year, not down. So despite all the noise around affordability and interest rates, the category is still growing and still investing. The bigger story really, though, is the mix. Roughly 2/3 of that spend has now shifted into digital, and that's really where the incremental dollars are coming from. Traditional is under some pressure, but local video is still critical to the auto industry. Broadcast TV remains one of the largest single line items, while CTV and other digital video channels are where the fastest growth and the new dollars are showing up. And just a note on that report, our clients can find our complete automotive report in the BIA Advantage platform.
Nice. So if you sort of clarifying questions for context on those figures, you mentioned 10 billion, and auto is sort of an anchor vertical, anchor category. To put that into perspective, what does sort of the whole pie look like in terms of local media spend? If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, it's somewhere in the order of 150 billion-ish, or is that in the right ballpark?
For 2026, with political, we're projecting $180 billion.
Wow, nice. Yeah.
182 actually, and about 10 million of that, which is political. So still about 172 billion without political.
That's right, and we get those sort of bumps in the forecast that aligns with the political cycle. So another just quick clarifying question. I know we're going to be talking about this a lot. Just for those unfamiliar out there, we're going to be talking about the sort of tiers. We're going to segment a lot of this discussion around the tiers that exist within the auto vertical. You mentioned tiers 1 through 3. You want to define those briefly before we go on?
Sure. Tier 1 are the OEMs. They're the people that build the cars and trucks and really fund those big brand campaigns. Tier 2 are the dealer associations. Think of things like Toyota dealers of the tri-state region promoting specific models, offers, or incentives, where the local dealers pool their money to help fund those campaigns. And then Tier 3 does include both new and used car dealers, and we do break out each of those verticals separately within our platform.
Nice. So yeah, thanks for that additional sort of front end context. So Steve, you are the right person to talk about this because you're sort of walking the walk out there with the sort of, embodiment, the physical world embodiment of all the things that BIA is coming up with in these sort of spending trends. So can you paint for us a picture of the sort of the auto advertising market or auto advertising, at least with respect to local markets? So that probably means mostly tier 2 and 3. And what you're seeing in terms of just that macro view and bringing your historical perspective. What are all the moving parts? What are the things happening now in the market that are just really sort of impacting a lot of that spend and the spending share shifts that BI is finding in its figures?
I would say that Mark touched on, the main points of the news, which is, growth of CTV, OTT, and obviously, a maturation of what I'll call, search engine marketing and retargeting and kind of what kicked off the dealership digital parade, if you will, a decade or so ago, where it really got very, very serious about search and where we as broadcasters, got involved in a number of ways, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I think that speaking to it from a broadcaster perspective, we are still, as a portion of the dealer spend, very, very significant. Some people say it's 40%. Some people say it's half. What you're going to find throughout the morning as we talk about this is that it is really a case of what different dealers want to do, along with whatever manufacturer programs are the best for them in terms of co-op, right? Mm-hmm. So on the digital side, there's a lot of factory programs and a lot of limitations that broadcasters face that we aren't approved for, direct co-op. So we have to combat that in different ways by selling for the non-co-op, really targeting for the non-co-op part or the broadcast co-opable part to the degree they still have I'm not as familiar as I once was with every co-op program. They change. They don't change dramatically every year, but if you look at it 5 years apart, I'm not as close to the ground as I used to be. It will be a fairly different landscape. And if you look at it over a decade, it'll be really different. But the challenge is with all media, whether you're selling home services or to auto, especially in these big categories, is the competition with digital advertising for a broadcaster. And I'm assuming, I'm here today to kind of speak from that perspective of being a broadcaster. We are still incredibly relevant as an advertising vehicle. We still command the attention of auto dealers. We still have tremendous access to dealers, and we have big local brands that they want to be a part of. So that is, at the heart of our pitch is what we stand for in the market, what our brand is in the market, and what we can deliver to a dealer in terms of visibility and not just impressions per se, but connection with an audience that we have proven over time. Broadcasters move people to do things, whether that's click, call, or go. We can do that with a big voice that fills the top of the funnel.
Yeah. So several sort of threads there to tug on, specifically around how a lot of those changing factors sort of translate to strategies. And I think one of them, where I'd like to start, is you mentioned that there was sort of this sort of jump towards a lot of lower funnel digital SEO type of things at a certain point, and then combining that comment with the fact that what you just said there at the end, which is that the strength that that broadcasters have in a lot of cases is the ability to deliver a really rich sort of top of funnel mass market reach sort of play, where it's leads that are high quality, they're owned, and it's like, not getting too far away from that when you're sort of chasing these lower funnel digital targeting types of strategies. So talk about that in terms of strategically how to sort of, you or any broadcaster, look at those assets and make sure you emphasizing them in positioning and sales and all the above.
I think that what happened in over the course of about a decade in digital, say from the early 20 teens till just recently, is dealers as operators, most dealers got very, very good at mid and low funnel because they were inundated with information and sellers and software and analytics, and it yielded results. What would happen, we would see it tilt, and the manufacturers tilted toward digital because of accountability. Manufacturers were really pushing like, hey, we're doing all this advertising and we're doing all this marketing, and we want to hold the dealers accountable for leads. And then at different times, that argument has been, the dealers you're not giving us the right kind of leads, right? So there's 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides to every story, ranging from, how you're coming at the problem, whether you're an agency, a dealership owner, a salesperson for a radio or TV station. The main part there to think about is that dealers are very entrepreneurial. The owners are typically very aware up until a certain group size. The owners, it'll be the general managers of the stores, are hyper aware of what is happening in terms of their sales flow, people walking onto the lot, people going onto the website, people answering the chat bot, people, calling in. And they are very sophisticated in terms of accounts that you will deal with. Dealers will tend to be the most advanced in terms of point of sale and converting customers. Now, there have been occasions when, personally, I was on a journey to buy a car and I walked into a dealership and I didn't get called on, and I wondered about that, and nobody came up to me. Maybe I just hit a bad time, but generally speaking, they're, pretty front and center. They're very organized. They kind of know what their message has been, and they kind of know what their walk-ins and call-ins are going to do. Plus, they monitor their phones and conversions and all of those things. So there's a lot of moving parts in dealing with dealers. Digital helps satisfy, down funnel helps them feel good about that. And then they'll tilt back, sometimes very suddenly, they'll tilt away from broadcast for a while. And then all of a sudden, I need to get people in the door. I need to get people on the website. I need to get people looking at the cars I have. And they'll revert back to filling the top of the funnel. Plus, the top of the funnel, the main thing that broadcast does in this broad way is maintain, and this has been researched by Nielsen and the industry. We've built pitches to frame this idea that reputation, top of mind awareness, those kinds of things are critically important, and that's the kind of thing that broadcast delivers. And then, we also are very conversant as companies. Typically, our salespeople are very conversant about digital, right? We all, I'm sure, the people that are going to watch this video are digitally educated, digitally savvy sellers and sales leaders who understand what is available, what we are selling as broadcasters versus what dealers are faced with in terms of choices.
Yeah. And you're right about those upper funnel dynamics and how it maps to the psychology of buying a car because, name recognition, branding, these things instill trust. And you want trust more than anything when you're, putting down 40 grand for a new Toyota Highlander or whatever the case may be. So that's interesting. And while we're talking about the funnel and the interplay of the media that map to that funnel, this is a good opportunity to trace it back to the forecast because, Mark, one of the things that you delineate in the data is the sort of share shift between over the air, OTA, and CTV, connected TV. And those formats, not exactly, but sort of map to the funnel if you look at it in terms of the quality and the quantity of upper funnel stuff that you're going to see in over the air, as Steve just went over, but also the interplay of CTV down funnel and the ability to target, and they sort of play off each other. But from sort of a quantitative and aggregate spending standpoint, can you tell us a little bit about those categories and what your forecast uncovered in the sort of share of spending shifts between them?
Right. And Steve got into this as well, but it is really encouraging for traditional media. If you just listen to the headlines, you'd think that everybody's moving out of OTA and into streaming, but the data really tells a more complete story that broadcast TV is still a workhorse for automotive. The dollars have drifted down a little bit, but that's from a large base. CTV is building on a smaller base, and it does continue to deliver, or broadcast continues to deliver reach and credibility, as Steve mentioned, which is really hard to replace with just digital media. And year over year, we see really high single-digit growth in CTV, but that money is really incremental. It's not necessarily cannibalizing the broadcast. We see that it's now more of a role, not of either or, but both, and utilizing both broadcast and CTV for their messaging.
So it's sort of good news for both in that, OTA is holding steady. It's not the exodus that you mentioned that some people perceive, while CTV is sort of the growth engine. So it's good news for both. And also sort of to give OTA some credit, some people look at numbers and they say, okay, well, CTV's growing faster, but we should always delineate in terms of the mathematics of forecasting that it's growing from a smaller base. It's a smaller number, so it's more inclined to often have higher growth rates, whereas OTA is more challenged to keep up high growth rates as such a sort of larger base figure. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. Broadcast has always been strong with auto and does work from a much larger base and is still getting a lot higher percentage of the dollars than CTV is.
Yeah, so the scale between the two is important to delineate. So thank you for doing that. So Steve, I want to go back to something you said earlier when you were talking about sort of the macro environment. One of the things that stood out is the variance and the inconsistency of all of the sort of dynamics that you have to deal with as a broadcaster from a sales perspective. You mentioned over time, things are changing, even between different dealer groups or different tier 3 players. The sort of franchise agreements, the co-op agreement is going to be different between everyone. So you sort of have to go in and just sort of really know your audience, so to speak, and learn each dealer and the nuances of it to go in with like, a targeted pitch. So what's your advice from a sales perspective of how to do that and go in with like sort of the right knowledge position when you're selling, any of the tiers really, or I guess
Well,
2 and
with
3
just
primarily.
a quick comment on CTV.
Yep.
Dealers love CTV,
Hmm.
and it's an opportunity for us because it is television and it is targeted. And most broadcasters now have a CTV platform or at minimum an OTT or a website streaming platform. What we're finding out as a company is there's way more viewers on our news streams, which is effectively most of us repeat our news in real time on our streams. And those are building very, very significant audiences. And dealers love those if you can sell them either as an add-on or separately, depending on whether you're using digital ad insertion or not in your streams. It's a whole nother rabbit hole I won't go down, but what I will tell you is there's a couple of times, there's O&O CTV, which is stuff we produce and stream, and then there is reselling OTT that where we do it using a partner or an executor to place it, whether it's Amazon or Google Ads or Mad Hive or any of those companies that or even Freewheel. Some people use Freewheel, and Locality has, which is a company we used to own, that does that for broadcasters, right? They package and process resold CTV. So having said that, it's an important piece of the puzzle. It's important to understand it, and it goes into your product mix. But looking at dealer dynamics, that's where I really like to spend my time, because the assumption is, I believe, we all know the marketing product that we sell. We all understand it. And if you don't, you need to look at the, basic training of your sales force and make sure they do, right? It is table stakes to be conversant in the products, how they work, where they fit, how they are utilized by all of your clients. Dealers are interesting because dealerships and who you're likely meeting, unless you're calling on a large dealer group, there's a feeling that there are a lot of large dealer groups and they happen to be very, very big spenders. But the truth of the matter is that dealerships are not as consolidated as they seem. There are 10 big dealer groups that make up a small fraction of all 18,000 in terms of rooftops. I'm guessing the top 10 dealer groups make up 2,500 rooftops out of 18,000. I think that the top, and this is where then when you get below outside the top 10, you start seeing the groups we all know really well, which, the Ken Garfs and people like that are regional, the Hendricks that are regional, they're 70 to 100 rooftops. And then you get into the Randy Marions of the world that are 15 to 20 rooftops in a very, like in the Charlotte area, for instance, and region of North Carolina. So you have 2 or 3 different kinds of businesses just from a structural point of view. You have the AutoNations, the Penske's that are public companies. They're optimizing everything, including advertising. And to really get to them, you're having to get to a regional or national headquarters level.
Mm-hmm.
And you're having to get pretty far up the food chain. And maybe you get there through your Toyota rep, maybe you get there through somebody else, through your GM, somebody it, because you do probably likely have a contact. People in your organization probably do. What I'm emphasizing here is it is important it's all in sales 101, right? There's no new, I think I said this earlier, there's no new school of sales beyond really what I call shoe leather, which is who is making the decision and how do I get to them? and how do I talk to them about their business and what they need. Those fundamental things will take you a long way. And they will get you in the office. In order to stay in that office, you have to intrigue the decision maker, and you along the way will have to go through a couple of gatekeepers, right? But what you want to find out, whether it's a 3 rooftop guy in Lafayette, Louisiana, or the biggest guy in Baton Rouge maybe has 10 or 15 rooftops right in Baton Rouge. Maybe that dealership has 25 rooftops in southern Louisiana. Whoever that is, and you're calling on them, you have to get to that decision maker and you have to find out about their business. What are their challenges? What are their challenges with the manufacturers right now? Right now, because that changes all the time.
Yeah.
What are their challenges with their advertising budget? What are their challenges with their sales floor? What are their challenges with their cost? What are their challenges in their service department? This is going to sound like a CNA because it is. You have to constantly be CNAing dealers. It's funny. I would say to people, you know what? We're going to like re-CNA all of our car dealers this week. And they're like, oh, that's going to take me off the street. That's so dumb, right? It's like, really? A CNA takes you off the street because you're spending an hour or two either with a client, sometimes virtually, or going to see them, and you're going through their business. We have to change that mentality. There's something wrong there. But I hear that. I still hear it today when we ask things like that. I still hear it. I've heard it a lot over the years, that, salespeople will fight the bid a little bit on CNAs. Now, those who are the most successful will not. Why? Because they're already doing it. They're doing it all the time. They know the decision maker. They've spent a lot of time with them. They understand what they think about their marketing and advertising. And you have to understand that these things are changing from a couple of points of view. New generations are coming in and taking over dealerships, and they have new ideas, and their parents are finally letting go of the reins, and they're getting to take over the business. And then that's one kind of change, ownership change. And they also then, by growing the business, may be becoming more corporate, more consolidating dealers in the area or in their markets, or even really trying to grow very big. Then there are the really big, fully consolidated public companies, which you can learn from them. You should spend time reading their filings and getting to know who's who there and getting to know what their metrics are. And they will tell you right in their annual report what their strategies are, because they have to make a presentation to the street. So the first thing you should do when calling on any AutoNation store, or any Penske dealership, or any of those top 4 or 5 that are public, is read their annual report. And read the management section, read their strategy section, read their section on competition, and you'll know they say it right in the report. Now, is it dressed up for a dance with investors? Absolutely. But they're saying it in writing what their plans are.
Read between the lines. Yeah.
Right. And then you can go in educated when you do get to those higher ups, because you will. You can get there. You can get to those people. And, I really thought about this interview, and I said, do I really want to tell our competitors, to
the playbook,
some of the playbook? But the truth is, if we raise our profile out there and my competitor makes a good impression about broadcast, I've benefited from that, right?
Right.
And I feel we're benefiting our competitors one way or the other. We're happy to fight over share. We're really good at fighting over share. What no broadcaster is as good as they need to be is working the system to get the message across of why we're so relevant and important. And while we're more important, and we've all lived through the wars of, yeah, that dealer changed to 100% digital, but they came back. Well, that's not a win. It was a loss and a recovery, but it's not a win. You fumbled the ball. Okay, you managed to recover it somehow, or they picked it up and then you tackled them, but you most likely, they weren't getting the results they wanted or needed because they weren't prepared when they did it. They did it because they're very entrepreneurial. But I lived through that age. It's not happening as much anymore because dealer ownership and dealer marketing is much more sophisticated because they've been inundated for 15 years by analytics, by data, by people selling these products of how to do better. They have a really robust dealer associations. There's very robust used car independent dealer associations, and they talk a lot about lobbying, but they also talk a lot about the business. And you can learn a lot from either joining. If you want to make an impact on auto dealer business in your market or state, you can actually, attend those associations, and there will be state meetings that will be near your market. And even if you are a seller and you have to pay your own way, there's a payoff to go in there because there's going to be dealers there, and they're members and they're supporting their association. So there's all kinds of ways to approach it, but the most consistent, successful way is to get the dealer, whoever's in charge, to talk about their business and talk about what they want to do, what they need to do, what the manufacturer is requiring of them. Understand that, and then come back to them with solutions. Everybody by now, I think, understands that, dealers make money three ways. They make money on selling the car, they make money on financing, and selling you the window tint and all the little stuff when they put you in the room with the guy, and you can't get out. Even if you're paying cash, I might add, you can't get out of that room. You can't avoid that room. You're going in that room. Okay.
I know the room. We all know the room.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's because that's where they make money, and you have to sign the
Yeah.
title at minimum and do all this. And then they make it in the back of the shop with service. You should make it your business to have them instruct you about how those businesses work and how they make money, because you, as a broadcast professional, as an advertising and marketing professional, will get an idea on how to help them. And dealers by their nature are salespeople, and they kind of love to be sold, right?
Yeah.
They respect people who are good at this, and gaining respect and thinking like a business person, thinking like an entrepreneur, thinking if you were the GM of the dealer, that'll work. And I guarantee you the people who are winning, and have the confidence of those dealers have spent a lot of time doing that.
Yeah. It sounds like at least part of this is sort of a classic case of know what you don't know, or know that you don't know everything. Have the humility to go in and do what you said. Ask questions, embrace the CNA, education, annual reports, all that. I think that's good advice in any sales context, but that's incredibly valuable here. I also like the sort of no new school equivalent, or I forget how you put it, for just good old fashioned shoe leather.
There's no new school of sales that changes the fact that shoe leather wins.
Shoe leather,
right?
Yeah, I love that. So, for shoe leather, for any of the above, I want to sort of ground
and
this.
It may be shoe leather, like it may be fingers, but you're doing the work. Shoe leather is, is what I say when it comes down to doing the work. Right?
Feet on the
Making
street.
phone
Yeah,
calls.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyway, I would love to sort of show rather than tell. This is all incredibly valuable to sort of drill this down to any sort of concrete examples, any sort of like best practices or mini case studies you have of, you have a great perspective of all the folks and the best practices. of like any of these principles in play, any of these best practices in play?
I'm trying to think of what would be relevant to the conversation. You mean around auto business in particular?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the
small
main
for tier
thing,
3 dealers that are like doing it
yeah,
right. They're
so
they're they're applying the shoe leather, etc.
if you look at our business, it's tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 1 is less and less. No, it's out there and it's a bit of a threat actually, because
Yeah.
dealers like to use tier 1 money. We used to get more tier 1 money. We don't get a significant amount anymore unless you're in the largest markets. And so we're dealing with tier 2 money and tier 3 money. And I would say if I were a sales leader, and I'm not as close to the ground as I used to be, obviously, but what I say and when I talk to our sales leaders, and I do, is know who they are, where they are, and you can get all that information. You can buy it online. There's a couple services you can buy that you can know what the dealer volume is. You can know who's selling the most cars by month, and you can get all of that information. So best practices, I would say, from a sales management and from a salesperson, is to ask your management to make sure we have access to all that data, right?
Yeah,
You
nice.
you will be able to pump money from auto dealers in a good way by knowing who the winners and losers are in the state and in your area, in your market. Know who the comers and goers, meaning who are people who are growing their business and who are people who are winding down and likely to sell. Those
Yeah.
things are all important to you as a professional. So it's out there. You just, there are, I'm drawing a blank right now on, what all the services are. And we've changed over the years. There's different ones for different purposes. But you know, everybody is in the game, and there's a ton of information out there on dealer profiles and dealer information and dealer data. And spend your time around that. So best practices are be current, read the newsletters, understand the people dealers are listening to. Who are dealers listening to? What do they look at? What do they care about? You can find that out by visiting your local dealer and talking to the head of sales or marketing, and whoever's buying the advertising will know. Like, what trade papers do you guys read? What newsletters do you look at? So again, back to shoe leather, best practices is be really good at gathering information. Same is true in about any big category like home services,
Mm-hmm.
or healthcare is a little more tough because a lot of information is protected, and even anonymized patient data is tricky. Like, how many patients do you treat for certain diseases, that kind of thing. I don't know that that information is as readily available.
Yeah.
But what I'm interested in for our industry is having people be the most professional um, marketing person that a dealership sees, right? And not be like, oh, my TV rep is wasting my time telling me they're the number one station and they reach the most people. That's so 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Don't be that person. Don't be that person. They know who you are. They know who your station is. That can be. Now, what can your station do that's different? How can you differentiate your station from digital? I'll give you one tip, right? CTV, I love it. Dealers love it, but it has its limitations. And what CTV doesn't do is fill the top of the funnel. Oddly enough, it's television, but it's very targeted. And when you buy 4 million impressions or whatever it is in Atlanta on CTV, you didn't reach anywhere near.
Yeah.
You probably reached 100,000 people 40 times. right? So if you run a spot schedule on WSB, you're going to reach 1 million people in a month. If you run the whole month, you're going to reach 1 million people. That might never happen on a CTV channel. They may not have 1 million different people. They likely don't have 1 million different people. I'm not knocking CTV. I love CTV. I am a huge user of CTV. But the fact is, you're not reaching everybody.
Know its limitations.
Know its limitations.
Mhm.
And you're reaching, a bit of a, walled garden. I mean, even a YouTube channel that has a YouTube guy that has 1 million views, you did not reach 1 million people. Okay, you didn't reach anywhere near 1 million people, and people
There's
get
a lot of
confused about it.
repetition. A lot of
Right.
repetition on
Yes.
YouTube. Yeah. Wasted.
Yeah.
That's wasted impressions, right?
Right. So, and the way the impressions are counted, right, matters. Our impressions are counted by somebody that basically watched long enough to see a number of commercials. It's
Yep.
it's shifting. By the way, Nielsen is changing the way and shortening the time frame. I don't know. I don't think it's been implemented yet. But we went down a big rabbit hole here. So
Yeah, no, it's all valuable stuff. This is
yeah.
great. And we are sort of getting low on time here, but before we sort of wind down with final thoughts, Mark, I'd love if you want to jump in and add to or respond to anything Steve just said before we wrap up.
No, just I agree completely that the broadcast is needed for the upper funnel. Use digital to help the dealers move the cars when they have special sales or whatever. But when they just want to get their name out there and the recognition, they really need the broadcast to get that reach to do that.
So synthesizing all that, it sounds like one takeaway from, a lot of what we just talked about is that it's not binary, and you shouldn't think of OTA and CTV, as either or, but the successful tier 2 and 3 players are using them and synthesizing them in intelligent ways. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So let's wind down here. I guess what we could do is just sort of any final thoughts from each of you, anything you want to reiterate or anything we didn't get the chance to talk about, future outlook, parting advice, anything like that you want to leave our audience with. Mark, why don't we start with you and then we'll end with Steve.
Really, as a final thought, I'd like to leave for our listeners that auto is not going anywhere as a local category. They're evolving, and you need to pay attention to how they're evolving and what media they are looking at and what situations they need to improve on at the current point, and be able to go in with a more of a multimedia campaign that can handle all of that for them when they need it. Yeah,
I think that's well said. Steve, parting thoughts.
So I 100% agree with Mark. He is saying the same exact thing. What I'm adding to it is you, the individual that represents us being broadcast TV and radio, want to be the most equipped and knowledge-seeking person that dealer sees in his week. He's got plenty of people telling him about digital this and digital that and how everything works. He's not interested in that. He's interested in what is going to solve his business problems. So if you can get on that level and differentiate yourself, then you can bring to bear the knowledge that we all have and can use to talk about what you can do, and then bring something to that dealer that differentiates your company, your station, whatever you can do, and whatever internal insights you might have that would help them, right? And so I feel very, very strongly about that, and improving. I feel that if we improve as an industry, as broadcasters, we will improve our ability to serve car dealers and make them more and more successful and get more value out of their dollar. So that's ultimately our goal with anybody we sell advertising to, because without that goal, they won't come back. And, we do know we can deliver. And I love what BIA is saying here, that it's not every quarterly earnings report, every one I've been on I've been on quarterly earnings reports since 2012. The first question is, what's Auto doing? I mean, literally the first question, if not the first, it's the second or the third. It's not the fourth or fifth ever. It's one, two, or three. And that's how important it is. And it still is.
Yeah. Great advice. And I think that's a good place to end it. So I want to thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, this was fun and very illuminating. So I want to thank you both. Thank you all for listening. This has been BIA's leading local insights podcast. Please like, comment, and share if you like this episode. Our guests today were Steve Pruett and Mark Dugan. I'm your host, Mike Boland. Our producer is Patrick Buno. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the BIA Leading Local Insights podcast. Stay a part of our community by subscribing so you never miss an episode. And we want to hear from you. What topics do you want us to dive into next? Email your ideas to podcast@bia.com.